Welcome to Journey to Esquire, the podcast. I'm Jocelyn Hardrick, founder and president of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the company behind this podcast and other great programs, like Journey to Esquire Scholarship and Leadership Program, which provides $2,000 cash scholarships to third-year law students and internships to second-year law students, along with leadership training and mentors. And Journey to Esquire, the blog, which provides insightful articles to help navigate you through law school and beyond. Find out more on our website, www.journeytoesquire.com. Hi, welcome to Journey to Esquire, the podcast. I'm Jocelyn Hardrick, founder of Diversity Access Pipeline, Inc., the nonprofit behind Journey to Esquire, the podcast, the blog, and the Scholarship and Leadership Program. I'm so excited. Today we have our guest, Krystle Cacci. She's an appellate attorney and a senior attorney at the Statewide Guardian Ad Litem Office here in Florida, and she's a graduate of Thomas M. Cooley Law School. She's an experienced policy analyst with a demonstrated history of working in the public and private sectors, and she's skilled in public sector organizations, analytical skills, government, research and writing, and public speaking. And she has a strong business development background and is a professional who graduated from Florida State University and University of Miami. And today we're going to pass the mic today to talk to her about diversity and especially getting involved in appellate practice. Welcome, Krystle.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be a part of this. This is exciting.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. We're so excited to hear from a Cooley alum because I'm a professor there, and we've had a few Cooley alums on the podcast, so always excited to represent our local law schools and to talk about appellate practice because, we were talking about how there's not a lot of students who know about it and what's involved, and we really want to encourage our students, our young lawyers, our young people interested in getting into the law, or older people if it's their second or third career. And so I think you're going to be one of the first people to talk about appellate practice specifically. But before we get there, let's talk about why you decided to become a lawyer.
My journey to, law school was a little bit of a winding path. To be honest with you, I did not want to go to law school for the longest time. My mother's a lawyer and, worked primarily in government, and I was in government as well. And I wanted to be different from my mom, so I went the graduate school route. I obtained a master's in international affairs and then a second master's in public administration. And those degrees served me very well. I really enjoyed, my time in government in the policy arena, policy work, working with different programs, economic development, substance abuse and mental health. And it got to a point where I was interested in advancing my career and, found myself applying for pretty significant senior level policy positions, but I would always lose out to those jobs to someone with a JD. So it just seemed like if I can't beat them, I'm going to join them. So I really did go to law school for a competitive advantage, professionally. And then, when I was going through the curriculum, I really found a passion for actual practice. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I actually want to practice law now. And so came out with the degree and was fortunate enough to start my legal career at the state attorney's office, like many people do, and have just been on an upward trajectory since then. So it started out with, I just need more letters after my name to now I really like the law.
Oh, wow. That's great. And then sometimes people whose, parents are lawyers, they get either really turned on by the law because they think what their parents are doing is exciting, or really turned off because of all the hours their parents work and how stressed out they are. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, so describe your law school application process, because like you said, you already had, several degrees, and a lot of people trying to apply to law school, they think there's one path, but there's a lot of different paths. So what was your path to the application process?
I actually, applied and got into Cooley somewhere around 2012. And at the time I decided not to go because it was a time where my policy career was really advancing and it wasn't the right time. And so after 3 more years or so, there were certain just administration changes going on in state level government, and I then decided in 2015 it was my time. So it was a little daunting because I think, as you mentioned in your intro, some of us are later in life students, so it was a little intimidating going back to school, going to law school as someone in their early 30s, surrounded by these 20 somethings. So it was very intimidating. It was very strange, but if I could say something to all the later in life students, it's everyone's on their own path, and so you just have to kind of cancel out the noise, and you're on your own journey. So that's really what got me through. I know that was sort of off of the answering the question of the application process, but it was the answer of getting into law school and then how I felt throughout the entire time. But I liked it. I don't think I was one of these people who kind of hated law school through the entire time, because I went in with a purpose. I think a lot of students go in after college, they don't know what they want to do, so they want to go to law school and then end up hating it. But I really appreciated the mental gymnastics I went through going through law school.
That is a good way to describe law school, is mental gymnastics. And a lot of people don't realize how tough it's going to be. But it is a doctorate level degree. And you don't have a thesis at the end. But instead of a thesis at the end, you have like every class is like a real challenge.
Right.
So did you only apply to Cooley, or did you apply to other law schools?
I applied to other law schools, and it just, at the end of the day, Cooley was the best fit for me. Now, when I started, the weekend program had not yet made its way down to Tampa, but during my enrollment there, classes slowly became available on Saturdays, which was great because, I was a full-time employee, so it was weekends and evenings were my only time, for class. So once I was able to start taking certain classes on Saturdays, that really helped with my work school life balance.
Oh, good. And then I have a couple of other questions. Like, because you're a later in life student, one of the things that can be tough is finding those professors to get recommendations, because they still require recommendations from professors. And if you haven't gone to college in 10 years, now you're looking at, okay, did I get an advanced degree so I can get those individuals, but then they don't know you as well. Right. What was that like for you?
Well, I think because, as you can imagine from my credentials you read off in the beginning of this, I'm a little bit of an educational masochist. So I was fortunate enough to have some professors from my most recent graduate degree. So my public admin degree was between 2010 to 2013. So I was able to, I had built some relationships and was able to get letters of rec from there. But and I don't imagine that's a problem for younger students because they are coming right out of college. But and then I think I did have some professional references as well, because I've been working full time since I was 21 years old. So I had made a lot of connections, and working in government, I had a lot of face time, with people who helped me develop professionally. So thankfully, I was able to gather letters of recommendation quite easily.
Oh, good. And what about the LSAT? There's more talk now of more schools allowing the GRE, which someone like you who might have already taken it for your master's, that'll be great. But it's not quite commonplace yet. So a lot of people listening probably still have to take the LSAT. Did you take a specific program to help you prep, and you were working, I'm guessing, while you studied? How did that all work out?
I did take a Kaplan course for the LSAT. Now, in full candor, I took the LSAT no fewer than four times. I mean, it just, I think a lot of people would be surprised if they saw my LSAT and my GRE scores, because those scores, even though they're not terrible, they're not indicative, I think, of my skill sets and what I can actually do. And that pattern for me in terms of taking standardized tests followed me all the way through the bar exam. I was not a first-time passing bar person. And I just don't, unfortunately, we have to take them, and I just don't think that they're very indicative of what I know and what I know I can do. So that was a little bit of a hurdle, but I did the best I could, and just if I had a message for those out there taking standardized tests, don't let that test define you. Again, it's another part of the parade of horribles that I had to block out during that process.
That's a great message. This last bar exam was a just tough one in terms of the passage rates, and a lot of students now, particularly the ones who are younger, are for the first time dealing with a big failure. A lot of them have done well in undergrad, or they've worked like you have and they've been very successful, and they're like, wait a minute, I should be able to just pass this thing the first time. So that's a great message to hear someone successful like yourself and say, listen, it's just a test. You might have to take it more than one time, and it's not a measure of your future success or your present abilities. It's just a measure of how can you do on this test in this time period, right?
You know what? Nobody talks about what you got on the bar exam after you take it. Nobody cares.
Yes. Whether you got it 100% or 65%, as long as you passed and you're admitted to practice, that's all that matters. Same thing with grades. What would you say about students who, again, like yourself, very successful when they go in, but man, they find law school to be a challenge and their grades aren't quite, they're not getting all A's. No one's getting all A's in law school.
Oh, that was definitely a sobering effect for me, because I had always been, high ranking in my undergrad and graduate years. And then, getting my first C in law school was like, oh my God, maybe I'm not cut out for this. But for me, and I had my moment of glory. I booked one class, and it was negotiable instruments, sales, which nobody liked. So of course I booked the class that everyone hated. But for me, the process wasn't about grades, because I had a resume to back up my now new shiny new JD degree. Those students who are caught up in the I need to book every class, I need to get all A's, generally are riding on grades alone when they go out to apply for jobs. I didn't have that pressure, so for me, law school was kind of like a punch card. Just do the class, pass the class, go on to the next one, and just get through it.
Yeah. And what I tell my students is, go live your lawyer life. Don't worry about this stuff. Grades have a very small amount of value, right? Your GPA, certain employers are very stickler, about grades. But overall, when you become a lawyer and you get experience, a lot of this stuff's just going to become so insignificant. They're going to be in the rearview mirror.
Right.
So another great message. And then you quickly said that you went to the state attorney's office and you've been in government. So can you talk a little bit about how you ended up, or how you chose that area of practice, or what led you to the state attorney's office?
So in 2019, I presume I was a 2L, or the equivalent of a 2L, working full time. I first got an internship with the 13th Circuit Guardian Ad Litem Office, and that actually was not an internship for credit, but I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to get some trial experience. And I loved that internship. And after that internship, I rolled into an internship with the state attorney's office. And so from there, from August of 2019 through the end of that semester, I was able to secure a position upon graduation. And the 13th Circuit is pretty notorious for hiring in-house, their former interns. So, and again, this was not an area that I thought I would enjoy so much, the criminal realm, but I absolutely loved it. And that's where I kind of started off post bar exam in 2020, the July turned August turned October bar exam that I was a part of. And unfortunately, as I mentioned before, I was not a first-time passer, and so I was devastated. I missed passing by 2 points, which didn't really make for a very happy holidays that year. But I was fortunate enough to land eventually with the Department of Children and Families doing child welfare litigation, and through that employment, they worked with me to secure my CLI. So it took a little bit of the pressure off to hurry up and pass the bar exam. And I worked in child welfare litigation for maybe just under 8 months. And before you know it, the Guardian Ad Litem Office reached out to me basically and said, hey, remember in law school when you interned with us and you used to draft appellee briefs? How would you like to now get paid to do that? And I just was over the moon excited because I knew I wanted to do appeals, and I did not think that it would be in my path this soon. I thought that, I needed to do my time at the bottom of the totem pole and work my way up in litigation before that kind of level of practice was presented to me. And, I'm still kind of in disbelief that the program remembered the work that I did as a student and invited me to be a part of its appellate team. And here I am, and just loving it.
Oh, that's awesome. First of all, great tip for students. I tell them all the time, do those internships with the state attorney, the PD. Now I have to add Department of Children and Families, Guardian Ad Litem program, because I was a Guardian Ad Litem for Pinellas County while I was a lawyer. I actually applied for a job with them and got declined. But they were like, hey, would you like to be a Guardian Ad Litem? I said, sure. If I say this work is important to me, then I'll find a way to do it. And I did. It was just amazing work, and just the amount of things these children are going through in the foster care system. And while they try to figure out who is the best fit for taking care of them, they just need a lot of compassionate, smart people doing that work.
Right.
And so I tell my students all the time, get that experience now, because those jobs don't pay well. So I'm going to go to that in a minute. How you've been in government, so maybe you're used to that level of pay, but it can be very tough for students coming out with 6-figure debt to take on that kind of work simply because they can't afford it. So if you can do it as a student and get that experience, that's going to be awesome. The one thing I tell students no one can take away from you is experience. Doesn't your grades and all this stuff, they can hold against you, but once you have experience, you have that, and you take that everywhere you go. So what would be your tips for students who want to do government work, who want to do the kind of work that our democracy really depends on, representing people who are charged with crimes, or being responsible for deciding what to prosecute, or defending the vulnerable among us, the elderly, the children, etc., but the pay is very difficult for them to kind of just pay their bills?
I think for me, yes, and because 90% of my professional life has been in government, I'm kind of used to it. But if I could sell government, number one, it is a baptism by fire type of environment. I think that, yes, the money is very lucrative going into big law, but law firm life allows you the ability to get really comfortable with the law, and you probably won't see the inside of a courtroom for quite some time. In government, we don't have time for that. You get in here, I remember being assigned 100 cases working in county court, and it's like, okay, now you're just figure it out. But that's the way I work best. That works best with my personality. I like to get my hands dirty very quickly because that's the way I learn. It's also fulfilling because you're not working for your bottom line is not money. I can honestly say that at the end of the day, working in government, I feel good about the work that I do. My counterparts in private sector make a lot of money, but they absolutely can't stand what they do. And I couldn't imagine going home every day hating my job. And no amount of money in the world is worth that. And then, in terms of paying debt, I am fortunately a participant in the public service loan forgiveness program. So I have no problem dedicating at least the next 10 years of my life to public service in exchange for debt forgiveness. So that there are other things that I know don't correspond to take home cash, but there's so many other benefits to government, and I really would encourage students to take a look at that, if only for the experience as well, like we were talking about.
Great. So now we're going to talk about, what advice do you have for law students future law students or even young lawyers, new lawyers, people just interested in becoming lawyers. And then, we said we're going to talk a little bit about gender diversity and racial diversity, right? As a person who has a different experience than those around you. I know probably as the experience I had going into court, not a lot of people look like me when I get there. What advice do you have?
I mean, I think when I started, let me back up. I think that my experiences with imposter syndrome and some of these other themes that are common to talk about were fleeting. They weren't. I can honestly say I don't feel that now, but whenever I'm in an environment where I might be the only minority, or I might be one of very few women in the group, I really just take it with a grain of salt. I really don't spend a lot of time and energy letting that affect me. And I think that my advice to, other new minority or female or both attorneys is to just focus on doing the best job you can and work on letting your credentials speak for themselves. And, to the extent that there are people out there exhibiting some sort of, racism or microaggression, et cetera. I really would work on not letting that take up a lot of energy, because focusing on that and letting it ruin your day is it's not going to be debilitating to the person exuding that type of behavior on you. It's really going to take up a lot of, mental energy, and it's going to affect your life. So it really is just going in with maybe a little bit of horse blinders and just blocking all of that stuff out and focusing on your own professional development.
Yeah, that's great advice, because like you said, it's not draining them, it's draining you. And I definitely, I burned out my first 4 years of practicing law. That was part of it, right? Trying to live up to other people's expectations. I'm like, this is exhausting. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So earlier you mentioned, that you didn't think you'd be able to do appellate practice early on. You thought you had to pay your dues. So if a student's kind of like, okay, this appellate practice stuff sounds interesting. First, I'd like you to talk about what they could do now to prepare themselves for appellate practice, and then talk about kind of a day in the life of an appellate attorney so they have an idea of what it's like.
Well, I mean, so first of all, I think that I am, team appellate law. I am all things appeals. The first thing that, I think that I want students to understand is it's not the Johnny Cochran, Robert Kardashian life. We are not in the courtroom wowing juries and thinking up, themes of the case. I mean, it's not as sexy as, your law and order type law practice. Appeals is the more cerebral academic practice of law, because what we're doing as appellate lawyers is we are looking at a record on appeal. We are looking at what transpired in the lower tribunal and determining whether error exists, looking at issues on appeal and determining if there's a good faith argument for, to reverse a lower court's decision, which is a really big deal. The thing that makes it exciting for me is that, at the appellate stage, we are contributing to good Florida jurisprudence. We are contributing to making good law. That's exciting to me. Some people might think it's just extremely boring, and it can be, but I like the puzzle that is presented to me when I get a new case on appeal. Now, to get involved, I can't emphasize this enough. It is so important for students to become really good legal writers, get good at your craft of writing. Students ask me, how is it that I can become a better writer? And you've got to express a level of intellectual curiosity and read more books. Now, I know we're living in a very TikTok social media world, and we have to get our faces away from the screen and start going old school and reading books. Expose yourself to different writing styles. You're not going to expand your vocabulary watching TikTok videos. So, I mean, students have to be a little bit more proactive, because the good writing starts with reading. and you really have to, put yourself out there to learn words, to get a good grasp on the mechanics of the English language. It's wanting. It's just very. People think it's weird that I enjoy reading books when all I do is read all day. And I said, well, it's a different kind of enjoyment. It's reading a John Grisham novel is very different from reading an appellate brief. So read more, get more exposure to writing, make it a point when you're in law school to fashion a good writing sample that you can present to potential employers. My volunteering of writing appellate briefs for Guardian Ad Litem was exactly the reason why I have the job I have now, because I took it upon myself to make sure that I graduated with a very good writing sample, something that was above and beyond my objective memo from research and writing. So that is part of the challenges, but you have to find those opportunities, and you really have to be proactive. You can't just assume that because you're in law school, these opportunities are just going to fall in your lap.
Yeah, you have to be intentional is the word we like to use about developing your skills. And a lot of students think legal writing, I don't want to be bothered, but it's like, this is our craft.
Yeah.
It is the one skill you must be good at, but no matter what type of law you practice, right? Because not everyone gets to speak every day. Not everyone gets to argue or negotiate, but every lawyer is writing. So you have to get that skill done. And we teach a legal writing workshop that we open to law students for that purpose. It's not our most popular because people are like, legal writing, but I'm telling you, that's the skill that's going to get you through. So thank you so much, Krystle. You've given us some great tips. We've heard about your go ahead.
No, you're very welcome. I'm glad I got to drive home that point about legal writing. Again, it's the bread and butter of what we do. It's, if you can beat them on paper, you're really contributing to the, judicial economy you don't have to waste the court's time to show up and have a hearing when you didn't have to.
Oh yeah, and they're definitely cutting back on the hearings, right? We love the Zoom hearings. Everyone it was so convenient, but the trend right now is cutting back on those Zoom hearings, which means let's beat them on paper so that we don't have to spend the money on our clients' behalf, even if you're government, right? That costs more money because time is taken away from other things. And as a former law clerk, I could tell you, if it's on paper and we can just resolve it on the papers, judges are happy. So get that legal writing done. Look out for our legal writing seminar. And let's thank Krystle Cacci for joining us today to discuss her journey to Esquire. And for more information, visit journeytoesquire.com. If you want to connect with Krystle, there's going to be some information in the show notes. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
So let's stop the recording. Here we go.